Class 9, welcome back to your social studies classes. Children, today I'm going to start a very new chapter, and the chapter name is South India and the Cholas. So, this chapter is included for your pre board exam also. So, just do understand the chapter and just read out the chapter thoroughly, right? So, in this chapter, you're going to study about the Chola rulers as well as their administrative setup, their administrations, and the different temples made by Chola rulers, their arts and architectures. Right. So let's start today's class. Okay, let's talk about the Cholas. From 5th to early years of the 9th century of the Cholas were not a force to be reckoned with. The greatness of the Cholas was revived about 850 AD by the dynasty founded by Vijayalaya. Although he began his career as a vassal or as a subordinate commander of the Pallava king, very soon he captured Tanjore, that is Tanjavur, from the Mataryar chiefs and made it his capital. His son and the successor Aditya I, that is 871 to 907 AD, inflicted a crushing defeat on the Pandyas. He worshipped Shiva, in whose honor he built several temples. His son Parantaka first, that is who succeeded in 907 and he ruled from 907 to 955 AD, almost about 48 years. And during his long reign, he extended his domain still further. We have already seen that he annexed the kingdom of Pandya king Raja Simha II, who fled in fear to Sri Lanka. Okay, now just see the extensions of the um Chola ruler. This is Pallavas, Cholas, and Pandyas. Areas dominated by these and Cheras, Pandyas, Cholas, and Pallavas. Chalukyas. These were the powerful kingdoms of the Deccan or the South India, we can say, southern kingdoms. Now come to the sources to reconstruct the age of imperial Cholas. How we come to know about the Cholas. So there were literary sources and archaeological sources. So let's talk about the literary sources. That means the written sources. So here we have epic named Jaya Gondan's historical epic. So the Chola era was the golden age of Tamil literature. Jayam Kondar, also known as Jaya Godan, wrote Kalingatu Parani. It is a historical epic of great richness. It tells the story of heroic deeds of the king Kulotunga I, who ruled from 1070 to 1122 AD. Besides King's brave actions in the wars, this historical work gives us an idea of the social and economic conditions of the age as well. It also depicts the cultural ideals accepted and cherished by the people. So this Gattu Parani, this is the 12th century Tamil poem and a war song by Jayam Kondar, right? Celebrating victory of Kulotunga Chola first over the Kalinga king, right? So it gives this epic or this poem gives a vivid and a graphic descriptions of battle scenes, right? Not only that, it also tells about or depicts the cultural ideals accepted and cherished by the people of that time, of that period, right? Okay. So it also gives us an idea of the social and the economic conditions of that age as well. So this literary source like Kalingatu Parani, this is we can say one of the masterpieces of the Tamil literature, or in Tamil literature we can say, right? Okay, now next is archaeological sources, monuments and inscriptions. So here we have Brihadeswara temple. So the Cholas built majestic palaces and grand temples. Grand temples. One of the masterpieces of Chola architecture is the Brihadeswara temple, also known as Raja Rajeshwara temple at Thanjavur. Right? So the temple was built about 1000 AD by Raja Raja, the Great of the Chola dynasty. It was dedicated to Lord Shiv or Shiva. The temple provides the best example of Dravidian style of architecture and the vastness, design, sculptures, and allied arts. Some of the prominent features are, this is Brihadeswara temple at Tanjavur. So this is the massive tower, Vimana, we can say, rising to the height of some about 180 feet, right? The tower being crowned by a massive dome, right? Dome means it's a chhatri type, dome shape, or a umbrella shape, we can say, massive dome. Which is a single block of stone weighing about 80 tons, right? So, and the Garbhagriha, that means housing the colossal Shiv Ling, nearly 9 meters high, and the outer doorway being flanked by two gigantic dwarpals, right? So it's not clearly visible here, seen here. And the inner walls containing fine and bold sculptures of various deities. So here are the sculptures of various deities, right? It's not clearly visible here. So the inner wall containing fine and bold sculptures of various deities, right? A few more features are presented in under the heading the Chola temples and their art in this chapter only. So we'll come to know and we'll read out this regarding this. Now let's talk about the inscriptions. Hundreds of inscriptions, both in Tamil as well as in Sanskrit, have been discovered in various parts of the Chola kingdom. Being engraved on stone or metal, wall pillars, or copper plates, they could not be tampered with. So, could not be tampered with means one cannot be mistaken, right? Therefore, as pieces of historical evidence, they are more trustworthy than any other written works, right? So, it's clearly written there that the inscriptions are engraved on stone, metals, like walls, pillars, and copper plates. That is why they could not be tampered with, right? So that is why this inscriptions of the Cholas that are more trustworthy than the other written works. As source material of history, their significance are as follows. Number one, some of the inscriptions supply dates and refer to the conquest of the kings and the extent of their kingdom. Secondly, the Brihadeswara temple inscriptions give measurements of lands gifted to a temple. Some of them describe the various ornaments worn by deities with detail of weight of gold and gems and the manner of their settings. A few copper plate inscriptions are preserved in the Museum of Leiden in the Netherlands. They record gifts of land to temples by the Chola king Parantaka in 10th century AD. These endowments came to be known as or came to be called by the name Leaden Grant. Not only this, the inscription also tells about the refer to the inscriptions refer to the deities whom the temples are dedicated to. In that way, the inscriptions throw light or throw important light on the kingdom's religious matter and the cultural history of that age, of that period. And the 12th century temple inscriptions reflect cooperative relationships among the different religious group of people. And it also tells about the Chola administration, right? For example, it's given here, the one inscription is there, that is the Uttara Merur inscriptions. So this is an example which contains details about the village administration of the Cholas, under the Cholas. So it tells that the kingdom's chief source of income was the land revenue, and based on a careful survey and the classification of all types of land. So in inscriptions of Cholas time, they tell us about the Cholas administration as well as religious life and relationship among the different religious groups of the people. And they also supply dates and refer to the conquest of the kings and the extent of their kingdom, right? Now, next is political history of the imperial Cholas. Now, with the death of Parantaka first in 955 AD, the history of Cholas for the next 3 decades did not attract much attention. But with the accessions of Sundara Chola's son, that is Raja Raja first, the Chola power rose to the imperial greatness. So underline Raja Raja first, Chola. Under this Raja Raja first, the Chola power rose to the imperial greatness. So let's talk about Raja Raja Chola or Raja Raja I. He defeated the Cheras and then he seized Madurai and captured the Pandya king Amar Bhujanga. He also annexed Kalinga. The eastern Chalukyas became the feudatories of the Chola kingdom. Raja Raja's armies carried out powerful raids into the territory of western Chalukyas also. He invaded the island of Sri Lanka and annexed the northern part of Sri Lanka also. Towards the end of his reign, he conquered Maldives. Thus, Raja Raja first made himself the overlord of almost the whole of the present state of Tamil Nadu, parts of the state of Karnataka and its adjoining regions, Sri Lanka and other islands also. So these conquests place him among the foremost warriors and empire builders of ancient India. That is why he was known for the greatness or for the extension of the empire. Right. Next is an estimate of Raja Raja I. Raja Raja's greatness lies not only in his conquest, he was a capable administrator, also a great builder, as well as a patron of arts and literature. So he was very much fond of art and literature also. A chief mark, his administrative system was an expansion of rural self-governing institutions. So he constructed the famous Brihadeswara temple, also known as Raja Rajeswara temple at Ranjavur. He endowed the and built some Vishnu temples also, and he worshipped Shiva but was tolerant of other sects and religions. Though he worshipped Lord Shiva, but he was tolerant of other religions also, right? As is evident from the fact that he granted a village to the Buddhist Vihara at Nagapatnam in the Malaya Peninsula. So from where we come to know that he was tolerant of other religion, that is an evident from the fact that he granted a village to the Buddhist Vihara at Nagapatnam in the Malaya Peninsula. From this fact, from this evidence, we come to know that Raja Raja first was a tolerant king, right? Okay, now a tolerant of other religions, we can say. And Rajendra first, Konda. Now see, Raja first was succeeded by his son Rajendra first. About 1017 AD, he annexed the whole of Sri Lanka. He organized the Pandya and Kerala territories and the island of Sri Lanka into regular provinces of his empire. His armies marched through the northern region as far as the Ganga Valley. He overpowered Odisha and a portion of eastern Bengal. To commemorate this event, he adopted the title of Gangaikonda and built a new capital called Gangaikonda Cholapuram, now identified with Ganga Kudapuram. So, his armies marched, like Rajendra first, um, his armies marched through the northern region as far as the Ganga Valley, right? He annexed and that Ganga Valley, as well as eastern Bengal, also portion of the eastern Bengal and Odisha. And to commemorate this event, this victory, he adopted a title of Gangaikonda and built a new capital called Gangaikonda Cholapuram. Right now, then in 1025 AD, he dispatched the naval expeditions for the conquest of King Shailendra's territories of Java and Sumatra. In the words of R.C. Majumdar, King Rajendra I had the proud satisfactions of seeing his banner floating from the bank of the Ganga to the island of Ceylon, and across the Bay of Bengal over Java, Sumatra, and Malaya Peninsula. The Indonesian islands like Java, Sumatra, uh, and the Malaya Peninsula, that these were added to the Rajendra first, or the kingdom. These were added to the kingdom of Rajendra first, right? Okay, now an estimate of Rajendra first. Rajendra first other achievements included the construction of an artificial lake near his new capital. Its embankments were more than 25 kilometers in length. So not only that he extended his kingdom towards across the Bay of Bengal over Java, Sumatra, and Malaya Peninsula, but he had built an artificial, or he constructed an artificial lake near his new capital, and the embankment were more than 25 kilometers in length. It was filled with water from the Koleran and Velar rivers. So the water from rivers Velar and Koleran was drained into that lake, right? So he also constructed a splendid temple at Gangaikonda Cholapuram. Its huge lingam, that a symbol of generative power of solid granite, is very, very impressive, right? Okay, now next is Rajendra's successors. Rajendra first was succeeded by his son Raja Dhiraja first, who lost his life in the Battle of Kopam in 1052 AD. On his death, Rajendra II was declared the next king on the battlefield itself. He was followed by his younger brother Veera Rajendra in 1063 AD. Traditional hostilities with the Chalukyas continued. He died in 1070 AD. He was succeeded by Kulotunga, who ruled from 1070 to 1122 AD. Kulotunga's successors had been very little strength and energy, with the result that Sri Lanka, Kerala, and Pandyas, they all proclaimed their independence. The rise of the Hosala brought about complete disintegration. That means complete shatter of the Chola kingdom, right? Okay, so here the Chola kingdom came to an end. Now come to the administration of the Chola. Let's talk about the administrative setup of the Cholas. The Chola administration combines, says Nilkanta Sastri, vigorous central control with a very large measure of local autonomy. It provided a pattern for a kingship followed by other rulers of the south.